We are fully remote. We don't have a big building or mortgage that we have to pay for. So we try to keep our fixed costs down so that we can be competitive. And I think we're going to stay that way. Some of that is timing. Because COVID happened, we were able to get clients out in Boise, Idaho, Sandy, Utah, out west where we're in Atlanta. By having a fully remote team, we're doing business over Zoom or Teams. So, that opened up the door.
Hey, Keith, welcome.
Hey, Michael, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Looking forward to our conversation. And, I thought we'd start off. You've built your consulting business now. You're well into 7 figures. You have a good sized team. And so I want to kind of paint that picture and have you walk us through how you got to where you are today. But I want to go back in time to begin, because from the research that we did, you kind of got your start, or at least part of it, working at Gartner Consulting. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would go even further back than that. I really kind of got my start at Deloitte in the mid 2000s, like 2006. Got my MBA, which got me the job at Deloitte, and just kind of took everything in. It's almost like going back to graduate school, right, to get your MBA. But Deloitte really I cut my teeth on consulting there. I did a lot of independent work prior to that. But at Deloitte, I learned a good bit of how to, grow clients, deliver. But I worked as a manager under some pretty aggressive partners. So I learned kind of the expectations at the partner level, but also at the delivery level. And it was mainly system integration type of work.
Right. And so let me ask you, these are well recognized names, Deloitte and Gartner. Right. I'm sure you learned a lot over those years and got exposed to all kinds of clients. But are there, a couple of kind of lessons or big principles that you feel like really made a difference for you, or that you feel were kind of integral, or that you took when you ended up starting your own consulting business? Just like anything that really stood out for you that you might offer to others who haven't worked at large firms like that?
Yeah, I would say the difference between going at it alone without the benefit of a Gartner or a Deloitte is you're starting to learn how they build models and statistical models and tools that help accelerate outcomes for clients. And then storytelling, right? Death by PowerPoint, right? I think everything that I did was a PowerPoint presentation of some form. So I learned a lot about how to do analysis and structure into a story. And that really helped me polish off my consulting chops. Now, from a business perspective, running your own organization didn't really get that from there. That was kind of learn as you go. So in parallel, I kind of, learned, I really started looking at how law firms worked, right? With partners and billing and utilization, and then practice areas and things like that. So I kind of took both and morphed it into what I'm doing now.
We see that a fair bit, where consultants or people who have worked in a, let's say, larger, more established consulting firm, they have great analytical skills. Like, they're very good at the consulting, but when they venture off to start their own consulting business, they reach out to us because they don't really have the experience of how to grow a consulting business. And so I got 2 questions for you on that. I mean, the first is, what do you feel are maybe the big differences, the things that you didn't get working at a Deloitte or at a Gartner, that when you went out on your own, kind of, you had to work hard to figure out? And then the second question I have, I'll just plant the seed right now, is for a smaller consulting firm, whether it's a solo consultant or a boutique, who's thinking about, how can I win business? Maybe if they're in an industry that is really heavily serviced by these larger firms, what would you say to them is the advantage that the smaller, boutique consultant has over the large firm?
I would say agility flexibility to, you're still delivering, the same quality. I mean, I had the pedigree of Deloitte and Gartner at a much less price. But getting into Deloitte or getting into Gartner is a task to get that experience, right? Um, I really learned a lot from the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's kind of when you're starting out on your own, you're wearing multiple hats, right? But if you build out your org structure on your vision and then reverse engineer it, you kind of plug away from each role and fill it with, as you grow, individuals that will, deliver for you until the point that you're just the CEO. And I'm not there yet, to be honest with you. I still have to touch on delivery.
Would you say that for you? I mean, that's one of the things that you learned, or at least was able to kind of benefit from seeing how these larger firms work, how they structure their org chart. So that's the kind of a lesson that you took maybe as you started your own business. And then in terms of what differentiates and what the advantage might be for a solo consultant or small firm compared to a larger firm, I heard you mention agility, right? Also potentially cost. You're not, the client is able to potentially pay, lower fees, but they're still getting the quality level, right? The value uh, that they would get from a larger firm, but they're not having to pay for the junior staff and, all the fancy offices and stuff like that because you're solo boutique, or, I mean, today you're much bigger than that, but, is that kind of what you're saying, or would you add anything else to that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think when you're starting out, you're able to build more intimate relationships. There's no levels of detail where you're the partner at a firm, and then you bring in your team to deliver. You're actually, when you're small, you are working directly with the client. You're in the office. You're whiteboarding with the client, solutioning, and they see you at work. The problem with that is when you're growing and you're trying to replace yourself, they want you. They don't want John Doe or Jane Doe. They want you. And that is probably, I would say, the transition from, in terms of growth, for a solo consultant that's trying to really grow a consultancy. That can be the most challenging um, aspect of it.
So let's put a little kind of pin in that. And I want to come back to that a little bit later on because I think that's definitely want to hear your experience around that. Just very briefly, why did you decide to leave? You're working at these well established firms. I'm sure you're making some good money. Why did you decide to go off on your own and start your own consulting business?
I'm kind of rogue, right? When you're at those firms, you have to follow their process. And I love my experience at both companies. Trust me, but um, I have ideas and of my own that were kind of suppressed there, right? And having autonomy, you can pretty much, take the wheel and drive your own car and go to the destination that you want. That independence, and then social impact. I'm very big on showing that African American males can, or African Americans in general can have a consulting firm. There was a somewhat lack of representation there, and I'm not saying it was on purpose, but I'm just saying it organically there was some lack of representation. So I feel more fulfilled carving my own path than working at those organizations. Though I have high respect and high regard for them.
Did you have a spouse or family at that time when you decided to leave the corporate world, if you will, and start your own business?
Yeah, my uncle had a lot of influence on me being an entrepreneur. He owned a nightclub, he owned restaurants, he owned a lot of real estate. And as a kid, I would come, visit my uncle. He's like my second dad, and I would just see checks and bags of money that he had to, deposit. He even gave me an opportunity to run his record store. If for the younger audience, there was a point that they had records and not,
Oh, I remember. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I was in charge of inventory, payroll and things like that. So that really got me going and thinking about doing it. Since then I was maybe 19, 20.
Do you feel overall that you had like support from family and people around you to make that transition to, leave this kind of established job and go off and build your own business? Or was that maybe a tough one?
No, I did. I knew in the well, there was two, areas, right? I knew I could always go back to consulting for a bigger firm. That's one. And I have a very good support system at home and my parents. So if I failed, I could always move back in if it got that bad, right? But so they were always there, but they were always encouraging. I think um, my father even had, and I have this quote on my wall here that I look at every day. He says, "I admire your tenacity." Right. So to do this, it really requires, that I got to get this done. So I never really stopped. Right. At Deloitte, I left Deloitte, started another company called Novel Management Group. That didn't work out. We had some good years. That didn't work out. And then I went to Gartner and then left Gartner and then started.
Okay, so you started a company before you went to kind of in between the two consult. And why did it not work out? Like looking back, what were the lessons there? What kind of went wrong?
Well, the partnership just didn't mesh, right?
Okay, so you had a partner.
Yeah, and I have partners now, and I have partners now
Okay.
in the firm we have now. But the partnership then did not work out. This personalities, the styles, just did not click, and eventually it came to a point where we had to go separate ways.
I'm going to take it that you didn't see, like the writing wasn't on the wall from day one. Otherwise, you wouldn't have entered into that partnership, or maybe it was there and you ignored it. I'm just wondering, like, if you were able to go back in time, right? Is there something you maybe could have done differently or look for that would have helped you to say, no, this is not the right fit to enter into this partnership, or to try and resolve issues before they got to the point where they got to where you ended up kind of dissolving it?
I would say I didn't see things until later.
What didn't you see? Can just, if you're a little more specific, if you can, whatever you're comfortable kind of sharing, but like what were the issues or what was kind of coming up?
Well, I resolve conflict differently, right? It's more mediation versus force, and I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. But um, yeah, totally different styles to the point where I was uncomfortable in how he would manage conflict and things like that. But when you're in a partnership, there's an imbalance in effort too, right? So wasn't comfortable necessarily with that.
Got you. Okay. So potentially how each of you are spending, or the amount of time you're spending inside of the business, kind of the contribution, the value creation, there wasn't maybe alignment around that as well.
Right. Right.
So going back, I mean, is there anything that you would have done to try and deal with that earlier? Like, for example, having a clear partnership agreement in place or setting of expectations or just anything that kind of comes to mind for you?
Yeah, with that situation, I probably wouldn't have entered it, but I would say you got to have an ironclad operating agreement, fully detailing responsibilities, contingencies if there's disagreements, and an exit strategy if you don't want to maintain the partnership.
So let's then fast forward. You leave Gartner, you go out on your own. Did you leave while you were like, were you building this business in some form or fashion before you left Gartner, or did you kind of start from day one once you had left Gartner?
After the prior company that I just mentioned, I was an independent. So I was doing work independently, and I have the partners that I have now. We were in discussion. Hey, let's eventually do something together. So then we started, winning some contracts. We would, get 1099s to fulfill it. And then I had this opportunity to go to Gartner, and I said to my partner, I said, "Hey, let me go to Gartner, see where this goes. But if it doesn't work out, I'll come back. We can get this going again." So he kind of ran the clients that we had landed before I went into Gartner. So it was still existing. Um, and I was seeing where Gartner was going to take me. And then I decided, okay, Gartner's great, but I think I can reach my peak or my potential by going back and doing our own thing. So rejoined the company in 2022, and then accelerated growth right after that. But I had We're very, very good partners with this company.
And is the partnership structure, is it split equally, or does one person have a higher percentage, or how does that
Yeah,
go?
two of us have the majority shares, equal majority shares. We have two minority partners in there as well.
And when you said that, so the business, you kind of had this independent business with 1099s, right, generating revenue. You decide, hey, I think there might be a bigger opportunity for me to work with Gartner. So you kind of went off and did that. Did you maintain any equity or any revenue from the work that your other partner was still kind of managing, even though you had left for Gartner, or were you kind of completely out of that and they were handling everything?
They were pretty much handling. I was more an advisor, right? The company paid for his salary and he kept it going. There's a lot of work there to do because most of our work is with federal government and state and local. So there's a lot of contract administration that goes into it, certifications and getting contract vehicles that you can work, like BPAs, master services agreements, things like that. So he was doing all of that work while it was going. But in terms of me working on an assignment outside of Gartner, I wasn't doing that when I was at Gartner. It was really a test bed to see, hey, will this work? And then I decided to leave.
So I know today you have about 27 full-time employees, right? Then another, maybe, was it 7 or so contractors? I think you said up to about 35, right? That you staff up to as needed. Um, when you hire people and when you kind of built out to that number, were you hiring just based on, hey, we won this contract, we now need to go and find people to service and deliver on this contract? Or were you hiring people even full-time before you would land a contract? How do you kind of go about it in the early days?
We did it based on demand. So we would win something and then grab a few folks that to help us. We started out as 1099s, converted some to employees, but initially we would win work and then hire full-time people.
Right. And where would you find them? Because some people would hesitate to do that because they wouldn't feel confident to go out trying to win big business if they don't actually have the people that ready to deploy right away. So what gave you the confidence that you could find people?
I was all in. I said, if I don't go full throttle at this and make it work, it won't happen. Right. And it was also from lessons learned in prior engagements. Right. So I knew in order to make this work, get talented people to work on the contracts, take the profits from those contracts, invest in a recruiter, ops person, build systems. Right, we're building systems with the profits from the initial contracts, and then once you have the structure in, it's an engine. So I don't do any interviewing anymore. Unless it's at the manager or above level. We've got a consulting bench now that we actually forecast out of core consultants. So everything initially that we did was the investment in the building infrastructure, so that we can have a full. And I will tell you, that is lessons from Gartner. That is lessons from Deloitte on how they manage utilization.
And so let me ask you about that. I mean, some people will go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Others might think, well, doesn't that mean that your margin is going to suffer pretty significantly in those early days because you're not going to be able to take as much home? What did that look like? I mean, in as much detail as you're able to share, Keith, like when you're bringing on a client, right, and then you're just reinvesting instead of taking money out, what does that look like financially inside of the business?
We believed in building a consulting company, right? Not, being independent, like 3 or 4 independent folks just, pocketing the money. And then we're trying to build something bigger. And in order to do that, you have to reinvest in the organization and you have to have a roadmap. So we built a strategic plan and financial forecast. We beat, every year we beat the forecast, right? So we're even able to extend more.
And what did that look like? Was it saying 10% a year, 15, 20%? Like what was the number you can?
2-3x projection.
So you beat it by 2 or 3x, or your forecast was for 2 or 3x growth each year?
We beat it by 2 or 3x.
Okay. What was your forecast though?
In 2022, we forecasted 1 million, right? And then double that. And then 2023, triple that. And now we're projected to do 2x, of that. And so we've been really building a great company.
Well, so I want to come back to that growth and what's contributing to that, that rapid growth inside our business. Before you that, let's go back to the pin that we placed, and we said we'd talk about that kind of situation that for some can feel very sticky and uncomfortable and hard to kind of figure out, which is if you are the one known as the brains, the expert, right, the go-to guy or gal or right whoever it might be. How do you shift and how did you do this? And what would be your best advice? I'd love to hear how you yourself did this. Remove yourself from delivery, from, client facing work so that you can spend more time on other areas of strategy and building the business.
I brought in a former practitioner or practice leader at Gartner, and he freed me from delivery.
So that means, just to sort of interrupt, so you hired a senior person, which some people might hesitate because it generally means you're going to pay more.
Yeah, well, we're paying them. Yeah.
Okay, so you're paying them well, yeah. And are they receiving the same that they would receive at a larger firm like Gartner, or is it?
No, we negotiated some equity and things like that, so that it would make it worth his while, right?
Yeah, there's upside potential, more growth, more freedom, more flexibility, probably maybe better value alignment. So there's I think there's a lot of things that founders often don't think enough about. They kind of go to the status quo of, oh yeah, I can't get great people and a high level senior person because I can't pay them enough. But oftentimes you don't have to match the salary of a larger firm. You need to attract them with other things like values and freedom, flexibility, upside potential, and so forth. So so you went, I'm going to replace myself by essentially cloning myself, right? Finding somebody who has a similar skill set or can deliver at that high level. And then you made that investment. What did that do for you and for the business? Like, and how quickly did you see the benefit of that?
I immediately saw it. It gave me capacity. And then, we were able to really exponentially grow the company. At the end of the day, if your goal is to grow the company, you have to have, if you're trying to win a championship, you need to fill it with all stars, right? I mean, if you're a coach and you don't have talent on your team, you're not going to win. I don't care how good a coach you are. You have to have talent, and talent will take you far. But also there's the dynamic of can we build a culture here that's, following our values, right? So going back to the investment, early on, we built a culture here that is very mission oriented. So everybody that we bring into the company, they're about social impact, right? Our organization is about social impact. So everyone that works for us has some type of empathy towards society, right? And we're able to really attract that talent based on that model, if you will.
How do you spend your time right now? I mean, if you kind of break it down for us, like what percentage are you doing any delivery anymore, any kind of client facing work, or like, just take us through like a typical week. What are the different buckets that you spend your time in, and what are the percentages?
Yeah. So I'm still challenged with, more of account management when things require, escalation. I come in and I'm aware of everything that's going on in every project. Just not hands on keyboard, right? So I meet with my managers on a weekly basis, kind of do a scrum, if you will. What's going right? What do you need? Just keeping those metrics. That's part of it. I think a lot of time we're answering emails. One thing that we have not done is I need an executive assistant.
Right. Because I was going to ask you, like, what kind of emails are you spending a lot of time on?
It's a lot of different types. I mean, either clients, leads, partnerships. Like in our, I'm looking at my email on the other screen here, but different types of events. Like I even schedule my own events where I'm speaking engagements. So I do a lot of the the work there. Do need to get an executive assistant though.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely do, Keith,
Yeah.
based on
Oh
all
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's come back now to uh, the growth that you've been able to achieve, right? I mean, you've experienced 2 to 3x growth, year over year, almost a couple of times, another 2x coming up. I know that your clients, that you work very heavily in the government sector, right? Federal, state, so forth. But can you kind of give a little bit more insight into what you feel is like the rocket fuel? What is allowing you to achieve that level of growth, and not just, for 1 year, but multiple years, and it's continuing?
A lot of the work that we do is assessing public policy's impact on demographic groups, specifically any overly impacted demographic group. And so everything that we do is data driven, right? So if you have a government that's about to implement a policy, we have data scientists, data analysts on the team that really do deep dives on social impact. So we do community engagement, things like that. I think our secret sauce is more along the lines of taking subjectivity out of policymaking, right? When we looked at the marketplace, a lot of companies weren't necessarily doing that. So that's really kind of our differentiator. We help organizations with digital transformation or organizational strategy, social health and social science in those areas. So that is our secret sauce, the data driven, evidence based impacts.
Okay. Now, talk to me about the, working with government. Are these projects that you're landing? And first of all, actually, what would you say is the range, or maybe even average deal size when you go and you land, a new project? What does that typically look like in dollar value?
Right. So we have two on both ends, right? I think the smallest deal we've done recently is 25K. And then the largest is 25 million.
Over how many years?
Over four.
The 25 million?
4 years.
Over 4 years.
4 years.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that we, do is really depending upon if it's small, will it lead to more, more work with that organization? And we've kind of do the farming and hunting, right? So we're concentrating on growing the existing clients, really focused on that, and doing less hunting and more farming.
When people hear a number like 25 million, right? Even split over 4 years, like it's a sizable number. Can you give a bit of insight into what does that actually look like in terms of, you got to pay your team, and you have a bunch of people that are, dedicated to working on this. What kind of a margin would a project like that actually end up, delivering to your company?
Yeah, that's a good point. So when you're structuring your team, there may be, let's say for math purposes, you have a team of 10 consultants. You may not make margins on a few of the, maybe two or three of the 10. Your margins will be more on your junior associates, um, and there's more density there, right? So you have to really structure it based on your resources. So we've been able to bring in really senior folks almost at cost, and then structure the junior and mid level consultants and have a little bit more margin there. So the aggregate is something in line with what we're more aligned to or projecting for.
If you were to look at, somebody else's consulting business, and they're in the government space, they're taking on, let's just call it a $10 million project. If they're doing things right, how much of that 10 million, after paying their consultants, both the senior and the junior, how much profit should be left over for them?
They should at least be getting net profit, at least 20 to 30. If they're really good with expenses, 35%.
35%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
We are fully remote. We don't have a big building with rent or mortgage that we have to pay for. So we try to keep our fixed costs down so that we can be, competitive there. And I think we're going to stay that way.
And that hasn't been clearly has not, doesn't seem like it's been a factor for you in terms of your growth. I mean, you have a team, right, of 27 full-time people, even more spread out. You're winning large contracts, right, in the tens of millions of dollars, and you're doing that working from a home office, is what I'm hearing you say.
This is my home office. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the reason I bring it up is because I wrote in one of the books, The Elite Consulting Mind, this concept of like the grass is always greener, right? People are always like thinking about, I can't be successful because I don't have X. Like if they're young, they go, I'm not as old and wise, so I don't have the experience. If they're old, they say, well, I can't keep up with all the technology. I don't have the energy of a young person. Or if they live in a big city, they say it's so competitive here, and they live in a small like rural area or whatever. They go, there's not enough business here. Like, and so here you are, you're winning, very sizable deals. But some people might say, oh yeah, I can't do that working from a home office, or I can't run a business with 20, 30 people. But I think you're showing that you definitely can, and you can do it very well. So
some of that is timing though, Michael, I would say because COVID happened, and everybody was home, we were able to get clients out in Boise, Idaho, Sandy, Utah, out west where we're in Atlanta. And I doubt that if everyone wasn't working from home, that would have happened, because we would have had to factor in traveling, sending a team out there and things like that. But by having a fully remote team, we're doing business over Zoom or Teams, facilitating meetings over Teams, workshops. So, it's really that opened up the door.
Yeah, there's no question. It certainly accelerated it 100%. So coming back to the government clients, are these projects typically won? Are you going after RFPs that are put out publicly, or are you finding that you're doing business with people who you've invested time and energy and resources into building the relationship first, and because of that, you're getting access to these opportunities? Like how are you kind of finding the opportunities?
In the federal government, death by RFP, everything's an RFP. By the time it's an RFP, you're probably not going to win it, right? Very low P win with RFPs. But when we started, it was whack-a-mole. Let's just go after everything at once and see where we land. And we were able to win some. And then once we won some, we started building past performance to a point now where we have a catalog of good past performance. We respond to a lot of RFIs because you can shape the deal. We go to a lot of conferences where we're building relationships.
Keith, sorry to interrupt you. Just for those who aren't familiar, the difference between an RFI and RFP.
So an RFI is really the government is going out to the market and say, hey, we have this problem. Can anyone in the vendor community help us solve it? Right. So in that, they're going to ask about your company's capabilities. They're even going to ask you, they usually come out with a draft statement of work. They want your input on it. And what we'll do, because we're experts in particular fields, we'll say, well, have you considered this? Or the best approach would be that way. And then you're able to have those conversations and frame the solicitation, right? And potentially get sole source opportunity if you land it, right? If you hit it right on the mark and your pricing is accurate and your capabilities are on point, you may be able to get that sole source or limited competition.
So you're saying an RFI, it's earlier than an RFP, right? You're kind of helping it to craft what a potential RFP might look like. And in some situations, the government might, based on if they find, let's say they're interacting with you and they're going, wow, like, yeah, you're really helping us. You seem like you could actually help us to solve what we need. Would they not go out for an RFP in some cases? They might just say, let's just work with you. Or would they still go out for an RFP, but you're going to be heavily favored in that one?
So the answer is
both.
Yes to both.
Okay.
Right. So we're Hub Zone certified and 8A certified.
What does that mean? We got a global audience.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. So the federal government has two certifications. Well, they have several, but our certifications are small disadvantaged business certification, and then a Hub Zone, which is historically underutilized business, where you're locating your operations. Our main office, which we rarely go to, is in a Hub Zone. And what they do is the government tries to invest in those areas so that you can employ people from those areas and improve the income level per capita of that specific zone, right? So there's government preferences given to those organizations, and the federal government is really asking or requesting that the departments really favor small businesses and give them more of an opportunity to do that. So that's where we can compete against your Deloittes, where they don't fall into those spaces, or your Gartners. They don't fall there. It's mainly small business preference for the government to do. Back to your original statement is the RFI. If we do a good job on it, and we have built the confidence and even had some conversations, and sometimes you get an opportunity to do an oral presentation. If you do a good enough job, it may never hit the street. You may get a sole source or smaller competition, maybe 3 vendors will be asked to bid. And that's kind of why we respond to RFIs versus RFP.
And can people go after RFIs even if they are not certified? You mentioned that.
Yes.
Okay, so it's open to anyone.
Yes.
Generally.
Yeah.
Okay. And are RFIs? I know there's some databases like SAM.gov and different ones where opportunities get posted through the government. Is that similar with RFIs? Are there certain kind of databases or websites that somebody can look for these opportunities?
Yeah, we're on SAM.gov every morning.
Yeah, with the cup of coffee,
yes.
Sam.gov.
Yeah, and we're just combing through the notifications, keeping up. We use a CRM that we monitor in each state of its sales cycle, and utilize that. Our sales team is like 4 of us that are really just honing in on sales.
Got you. Let me ask you this. So, I mean, again, you're a team 20 plus 30, people, depending on what's going on. If somebody's listening to this going like, yeah, I would love to tap into government work. The idea of the RFPs always felt maybe a bit of a waste of time, but this RFI thing feels like there's a bit more promise. But they are a solo consultant, or maybe it's just 2 or 3 people. Would you recommend that they spend time looking into RFIs and RFPs, or do you think that it's potentially a waste of time because there's, especially the RFP level, many elements they can't control? As you said, it's kind of like a whack-a-mole. So I'm wondering, how would you suggest, and are there any stages, or what's the thought process that somebody should have if they're interested in actually going after government business?
As a smaller consultancy, I think it's very good to look at everything that comes out through an RFI. And quite often, subcontracting with a larger company is a great way to get federal experience. The federal government and state and local are similar to this. If you don't have experience in that market, it actually it kind of counts against you somewhat.
And when you say in the market, you mean actually like working with
the government. Yeah.
Right. So you could be a real expert in water systems, but if you haven't worked with the government in some form or fashion, providing, let's say, water system services or something relevant, that's probably going to be kind of a bit of a knock against you. They're looking for, do you have experience working with state or federal government?
Correct. And it's like the chicken and egg scenario, right? So in order to really get that experience subcontracting with a larger company, it doesn't have to be a big company. It could be a small business like ours, where you're getting 1 or 2 consultants on a project, or even 1, or even doing it as a solo practitioner. And then you start building your portfolio of past performance. And then each deal builds on the next one, right? So if you win something that's $25K, the next deal could be $100K, and then the next deal could grow to $500, and so on and so on. But starting out, subcontracting would be good, good path forward for that.
And the way for people to find those subcontracting opportunities would not be through SAM.gov. It would be reaching out to actual other companies that you believe would be going after that business. Is that correct? Or is there some other way that might be better?
It's a portfolio of things that you have to do. There's also a subcontractor database, I think it's Subnet, if I'm not mistaken, that you can reach out to larger companies, or just register and they can reach out to you. But I would every agency has some form of an industry day, right? Go to the industry day. You have the buyers there. They tell you what they're looking for the next fiscal year. The federal government puts out a procurement forecast with the contact of the person that's in charge of that program. And there's also, if it's an incumbent, there's the incumbent's point of contact is on there. You may want to reach out to them as well. So there's several different things that you have to do, all in parallel though. You got to build a capability statement, a 1 or 2 page capability statement that summarizes what you do, where you've worked at, your certifications, your next codes, um, and things like that, that will help you market yourself.
Do you think it would be wise for somebody to kind of dip their toes into the waters of going after government work while also going after more private sector work? Or do you feel that if somebody is especially a smaller firm with only a few people, that if they're going to go government, they need to kind of go all in? And like, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say, I've actually learned this from you, niche, right? You don't boil the ocean. If you're going to, you either need a service expertise or an industry expertise. So I would, if you want to go into federal government, I would go all in, and understand the intricacies of the federal government, right? If you're going to do state government, the same thing. Really focus on the industry, leverage the experience over time, and then maybe go into those private sectors, because sometimes there's a natural progression. For example, HUD is one of our clients. You can go from HUD into, financial institutions that in the mortgage industry, for example, right? There's some leverage that you can do, but I would focus, really on the industry.
Well, it's been great, Keith. I know that we're like just kind of scratching the surface
Yeah.
on so many of these
Yeah.
elements. But I appreciate the time, and I want to be conscious of the time that we have. I also want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your company and everything that you have going on. So, where would be the best place for them to go to learn more?
Yeah, I'm heavily on LinkedIn. Keith L. Scott. You'll find me somewhere up there. And then klscottandassociates.com. You can reach us on our website, and definitely reach out to me. I'm definitely interested in conversing and sharing our lessons learned and partnering. We're always looking for good partners.
There we go. We'll link all that up on the show notes at consultingsuccess.com. Keith, thanks again so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.